You ever hear something so out of place it makes your whole body stop? That's exactly what happened to Jack Rogers on a humid Tuesday morning, deep in the Florida Everglades. The air was thick, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes you feel like you're swimming through heat. Jack, a seasoned wildlife guide who'd seen all kinds of creatures in all kinds of messes, was about to witness something no one could have prepared him for. He was navigating a narrow trail along the swamp's edge, just doing his thing when he heard it. A cry. Not loud, more like a whimper. But it cut through the air like a warning. It was the kind of sound that grabs your gut and twists it like something was wrong. Really wrong. He pushed through the brush, heart pounding, and then, bam! Right there in a shallow clearing was a grizzly bear cub, bleeding, shaking, barely hanging on. And surrounding him? A pack of gators, 4, maybe 5 of them. Hungry. Ready. Now let me tell you something. Grizzlies don't belong in Florida. They're mountain creatures, northern wanderers, not swamp dwellers. Seeing one here was like spotting a penguin in the desert. Jack didn't even stop to think. He just moved. He let out the loudest shout he could muster and started throwing anything he could get his hands on. Sticks, rocks, even a metal water bottle. The gators backed off just enough. Just enough for Jack to wade in, scoop up that muddy little bear and haul him back toward his boat, heart in his throat. Every step in that marsh felt like a gamble. That moment right there, that wasn't just a rescue, that was instinct in action. No script, no backup, just one man, one broken little animal, and a whole lot of courage. As Jack rode away with the cub lying limp beside him, he couldn't stop asking himself the same question. What the hell is a grizzly doing out here? Something didn't add up. And you know what? When something doesn't make sense in nature, there's usually a human hand behind it. Sometimes life drops a story in your lap that refuses to be ignored. Jack didn't just stumble on a cub, he stumbled on a mystery. And deep down, he knew this wasn't just about one bear. It was bigger, much bigger. But first he had to make sure the little guy would make it through the night. One thing at a time. First you save the life. Then you ask the hard questions. For a few days, things were quiet. Jack took the cub home. Yeah, home. Not exactly the plan, but what else do you do when animal control gives you the runaround and no sanctuary wants to touch a grizzly without papers? He set up a warm space in his old tool shed, fed the little guy a mixture of goat's milk and mashed fruit, and watched as the wounds slowly began to scab over. But that question? How did this bear end up in Florida? It didn't go away. It got louder. So Jack started poking around, calling in a few favors, talking to rangers, vets, even a couple shady folks he knew from his younger days. And pretty soon, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Not just rumors, but reports. Crates of wild animals being found dumped by roadsides. Big cats, monkeys, even a kangaroo once. No joke. All part of what authorities were calling backyard zoos. Turns out there's a whole underground network out there. People buying, selling, trading exotic animals like they're rare baseball cards. Private collections, unlicensed mini zoos, and wannabe influencers keeping dangerous wildlife in suburban garages just to go viral. Some folks have no idea what they're getting into. Others, they know exactly what they're doing and just don't care. Jack learned that when one of these operations goes south, like when the feds raid a property or the money dries up, the animals are often just abandoned, left to starve. Or worse, dumped in places like the Everglades where the ecosystem gets torn apart and animals like that poor bear cub end up in life or death situations. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This can't really be happening in the US, right? Oh, but it is. It's happening right now. And that's what hit Jack the hardest. He wasn't just caring for an injured cub anymore. He was holding evidence of a much darker, much bigger operation. He started keeping notes, tracking patterns, documenting what he found. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was the start of an investigation. One that he never meant to be part of, but couldn't walk away from either. And let me tell you something personal. When you stumble onto a truth that heavy, you can't unknow it. It changes how you see the world. Jack could have looked the other way. A lot of people do. But once you know there's an entire market profiting off the suffering of innocent animals, ones that don't have a voice, that can't run, that can't fight back, it does something to you. And maybe that's why Jack started looking at the cub differently. Not as just something to be fixed, but as someone to protect, someone worth fighting for. But what he didn't see coming, and none of us would, was how that bear would soon start changing him. They say healing doesn't always come the way you expect. And Jack, he wasn't expecting anything, not comfort, not connection. Honestly, he'd been living with ghosts for a while. The kind you don't talk about. The kind that follow you in silence and sit heavy in the room even when you're alone. But then came Cliff. Yeah, that's what Jack named the cub. Cliff. Not because it meant something deep at first. It just came to him one morning while spoon-feeding mashed sweet potato into a furry, stubborn mouth. "You look like a cliff," he muttered. And just like that, the bear had a name. And names, they change everything. Cliff wasn't just recovering. He was coming back to life. And so was Jack in a way. Feeding turned into play. Bandaging wounds turned into trust. Long nights listening for signs of pain turned into quiet moments of peace. It was strange. The kind of peace Jack hadn't felt since long before the war. See, what most folks didn't know about Jack is that he carried more than scars on the outside. He'd served 2 tours overseas, came back in one piece, at least physically. But the mind, that's a different story. There were nights he couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't stop the memories that played like broken film in his head. The noise, the loss, the questions. But when Cliff was around, it all quieted down. And that's the thing about bonding with an animal. There's no need to explain yourself, no judgment, no awkward small talk. Just presence. That kind of silent companionship. It's powerful. Healing. Jack started to smile again, started to eat better, started to wake up with purpose. Cliff, too, was changing. He was gaining weight, walking with more confidence, even growling now and then. A low rumble, like he was remembering his strength. There was a moment, and Jack swears this happened, when the bear nudged open the back door of the shed, wandered into the yard, and sat next to him in the sunlight, shoulder to shoulder. Just sat there. Didn't ask for anything. Didn't need anything. And Jack thought, yeah, you get it too, don't you? It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something deeper. Mutual recognition. A bond forged in the middle of nowhere between 2 beings who'd both been torn up by the world and somehow found their way to each other. Funny how that works, right? Sometimes the thing you thought you were saving ends up saving you. And just when Jack started to believe they were safe, that the hardest part was over, well, let's just say fate had other plans. Because trouble, it has a way of coming back when you least expect it. Trouble doesn't knock on your door politely. It kicks it down. Jack was out back chopping firewood when he noticed the birds had gone silent. That eerie stillness. No wind, no rustle, not even a cricket. Just nothing. If you've ever spent time in the wild, you know. That kind of silence doesn't mean peace, it means something's watching. Then he saw the truck. Black. No plates. Dust-covered windows. It rolled up slow, too slow. Jack's instincts, sharpened by war and wilderness, kicked in hard. He didn't wait. He moved straight toward the shed where Cliff was resting. Heart thudding, hands clenched, eyes scanning. 2 men stepped out of the truck. Tall, lean, dressed too clean for the backcountry. One had a clipboard, the other, a tranquilizer rifle. And just like that, the rescue became a standoff. They claimed they were from Wildlife Recovery Services. Yeah, right. Jack wasn't buying it. There was no badge, no paperwork, no official anything. Just fake smiles and veiled threats. They wanted the bear. "He's not yours," one of them said, calm as a whisper, "and you've already seen too much." That's when Jack felt it, that fire in his chest. The one that only shows up when someone crosses a line you didn't even realize was drawn in blood. He didn't care who they were or what they wanted. Cliff wasn't going anywhere. They tried to push past him. Jack stood firm. Words were exchanged, tense, sharp, like coiled wire. One of them raised the rifle. Jack didn't flinch, but Cliff roared. Not a baby growl, not the uncertain noise of a recovering cub. No, this was different. Deep, primal, the kind of sound that vibrates your bones and reminds you exactly what kind of animal you're dealing with. The men froze. Cliff barreled out of the shed, fur bristling, eyes locked on the intruders. He didn't attack, but he didn't back down either. And that roar, that one act of defiance, it shattered whatever illusion of control they thought they had. They bolted, got in the truck and peeled off down the gravel, bumping and skidding like amateurs. Jack stood there in the dirt, Cliff beside him, both of them breathing hard, alive, connected in a way that words could never explain. And here's the thing. That moment changed everything. Because up until then, Cliff had been the one in danger, the one being protected. But now he had shown something else. Strength, voice, survival. Jack looked at him differently after that. Not just as a cub or a rescue or a symbol of some broken system. He looked at him like a warrior. And deep down he knew, if the traffickers came back, they wouldn't be dealing with a scared little bear anymore. They'd be facing something much harder to break. But even warriors need safe ground. And that's when Jack realized, maybe it was time to let go. When you care for something, really care for it, you start to see the world through its eyes. Jack had spent months with Cliff, from the moment he pulled him out of the swamp, covered in blood and fear, to the days spent watching him grow stronger, more confident. It wasn't just Jack that had changed. Cliff had too. But the thing about change is that it's not always comfortable. Sometimes it means making the hardest decision of your life, the one that breaks your heart wide open even though you know it's the right thing to do. Cliff wasn't meant to live here. Not in Jack's shed, not in this backyard, not in a life confined to the edges of what humans think is safe. It wasn't just about the cub anymore. It was about what was best for him. Jack spent one last night with Cliff before everything shifted. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them was full of understanding, of respect, of memories made. The cub had grown from a frightened little animal into a powerful force of nature, a survivor, and Jack knew that he couldn't offer that kind of future. The next morning they drove together. Jack didn't say much on the road, his hands gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. But Cliff sat quietly beside him, calm and content. It wasn't a sad journey. It was a journey of trust. The trust that comes from knowing you're doing what's right even when it hurts. At the wildlife reserve, Jack helped Cliff out of the truck. The moment was bittersweet, like watching a child leave home for the first time. Cliff looked back at Jack, a steady gaze that seemed to say everything without a word. "You'll be fine," Jack whispered, as if to reassure himself as much as the bear. Cliff didn't need him anymore. Not like this. He was strong enough to stand on his own. As Cliff made his way toward the sanctuary's gates, Jack watched, his chest tight with emotion. But there was something else too. Hope. Real, raw hope. Cliff was going to find a place where he could roam free, where he could live the life he was meant to. And maybe, just maybe, Jack would find his peace too. That's when it hit him. A thought, a simple truth. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is the one that sets you free. Jack didn't watch the plane take off. He didn't need to. He'd already said his goodbye, quietly in the silence of the wilderness, with a simple truth between them. You were never mine, Cliff. But for a little while, we saved each other. And as Jack turned to walk back home, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of peace. A sense that he too was on a new path. One of healing. One that might just take him places he never expected. What if saving one life could change everything? Jack's journey with Cliff proves that sometimes the greatest acts of courage aren't about fighting monsters or conquering the impossible, but about standing up for what's right. even when the world tells you it's not your fight. So ask yourself, what would you do if you were in Jack's shoes? Would you risk it all for something you believed in? Stories like this remind us that our choices, no matter how small they seem, ripple out and affect the world in ways we can't always predict. They also make us question, how far are we willing to go to protect the vulnerable? And most importantly, what would it take for us to truly stand up for the voiceless? If you found inspiration in Jack's journey, don't forget to check out our other stories. There's always more to discover about the incredible untold tales of bravery, survival, and the deep connections we share with the world around us. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next.